Good morning, Christ City. Good to see everybody. Excellent. Hey, I feel like fall has finally arrived. I'm very excited about that. My name is Matthew Watson. I serve as one of the pastors here at Christ City. If I've not had a chance to meet you, really would love to meet you on the way out, and really glad that you have carved out some time to worship with us as we together remember God's promises. I just want to jump in. I want to ask you this question. Anybody have any regrets? Perfect. You are my people. Anything, maybe as you kind of sort of think through things that maybe you regret, something that you didn't do in the past that you wish you'd done. Maybe it's sort of the other side of that equation. Maybe it's something that you did and you wish you hadn't wish you just hadn't done it that way. One of my more recent regrets is a party that I didn't attend. Should have gone. Didn't go. Regret it to this day. Now, I want to tell you about it. It's going to take me a minute, so stay with me. So earlier this year in May, I'm with Justin, Andrea, and Nikki, and we're in California. We're in Southern California, and we're at Fuller Seminary. We were there at a conference and some other things, it was like a free trip to California, I'll just be honest with you. And Fuller asked us to do something, and I said, yeah, we're happy to help you reflect on what it is to reach people in cities in America. And you can fly us to California for that. Now, at the end of the conference so that we were there, my wife Lisa, she was also, at the end of the conference, she was flying to California because she was speaking at a church. And so my idea, this was over Memorial Weekend, my idea was once the conference was over, then I would just stay with Lisa and support her in Southern California at Newport Beach so that we, because I love the Lord and her. And so we were going to stay there. So it was going to be like kind of like a weekend getaway with church services involved, was kind of what it was going to be. But my plans changed during the weekend because, now stay with me here, I learned that there was a ghost town for sale in West Texas. Just going to let that sink in. Turns out there was a ghost town that was for sale for $100,000. And so my brother and I found out about this, and we were like, bro, I don't know, let's go look. So it was the town of Lobo, Texas, which is 12 miles from the border of Mexico in the Rio Grande. It's in the Guadalupe Mountains, which is a beautiful sort of area. The town had been a ghost town since the 1990s. It ran out of water. But all of the structures were still there. It had a post office. It had a grocery store. It had a motel. It had a swimming pool. I don't know how they filled it. There's no water there, but it had a swimming pool. It had houses. It had a gas station. It was kind of 10 acres. And I'm seeing all of this, and I'm thinking, this is a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. So after consulting with my wife, I said, hey, I know you really want me to stay and watch you preach, but there's a ghost town for sale. After a lengthy conversation, I changed my plans and flew from Los Angeles to Dallas, and my brother Luke picks me up, and we drive the 10 hours to Lobo, Texas. And we check into the smallest, weirdest motel in the middle of nowhere that you have ever seen. But it's 20 minutes from said ghost town. Now, it's getting kind of late, and we're kind of unpacking, kind of getting into this motel, and my brother looks and it's dark. It's probably about 9:30, 10 o'clock at this point. He goes, hey, you think we should just drive out and go check it out? I mean, it's 20 minutes away. Now, I'm thinking, I don't know that we should just sort of launch out into the middle of the desert and go see a ghost town. Not that I'm scared, because Christ is with me, but I'm just not, let's wait till the morning. That was my regret. Turns out, the folks that owned the ghost town, they were having a massive party at the ghost town. It was like the West Texas version of Burning Man meets Coachella. And they partied all night. And we didn't go. Stayed at the hotel. We should have gone, and I regret that decision. B.J. Novak in his TV series, B.J. Novak, he wrote for The Office. He wrote and directed a movie last year called Vengeance. It's a funny, despite the sort of menacing name, it's actually quite a funny movie. Novak plays a podcaster and writer he's doing a story about the death of a girl that he dated. At the end of the movie, I'm not going to give away any spoilers if you want to take a look at it. At the end of the movie, the mystery is solved, and Novak's character is heading back home after having secured his podcast, but then deciding that he won't post it, even though it would have propelled him to stardom. He's discussing this decision with the mother of the girl that passed, and when she asks him about how things have gone and why things didn't go the way that he hoped, Novak replies, well, I'm living with no regrets. To which the mother, played by J. Cameron Smith, she replies, I never understood that. I mean, how do you do that? In my life, everything starts with regret, ends with regret, in between regrets. It's all regrets. You run as fast as you can from one regret, and of course, you're just running straight into the next one. That's life. It's all regrets. That's what they should say. There's no other way to be alive. It's all regrets. So make them count. There's a sober realism in J. Smith Cameron's character, a mother who's lost her daughter to drugs and a broken world that moved on from her grief. A woman who's recognizing the beauty and brutality of life, of how joy dances with tragedy, and how life is just so finite. In so many ways, I think this is kind of the wise, if not melancholy, message of Ecclesiastes that we've been wrestling with over the last several weeks. In Ecclesiastes, we find ourselves just kind of arm wrestling with this very real and very frustrating reality that the world can feel meaningless sometimes. It can seem like there's no rhyme or reason to life's flow. Evil men prosper, righteous men are tortured, hard work is taken advantage of, laziness is rewarded. And we've been holding on, we've shared this before, but we've been holding on to these two untenable or undeniable realities. On the one hand, life is vapor, and on the other hand, life is precious. We're holding on the one side our ephemeral life with all of its chaos and suffering and hardship and randomness and lack of control, with God's life, the one that doesn't have a beginning or an end because it always has been and always will be. When we began this series several weeks ago, in our opening sermon, Pastor Andrea, she noted that Ecclesiastes, it covers a wide range of human experiences and emotions, proposing possibilities of what it means to live wisely in the world before God. Ecclesiastes displays this art of navigating the complexities of life and discerning meaning and meaninglessness. And the aim of this series, as we've meandered our way through it, is to face the world and all of its beauty and all of its brokenness, knowing that God holds it all, even the parts that we can't make sense of. We've been wrestling with this. We've been arguing about this, reflecting on this in our small groups and with each other and text threads and text messages and in our prayers. And as we come to chapter 9, I'm just going to tell you, we're going to continue to wrestle with it. Spoiler alert. Next week is our last sermon in this series, and Pastor Justin will tidy everything up. So you'll want to make sure that you come early and stay late for that one. But today we're just going to wrestle with the heavy topic. But I do think that as we move towards the end of chapter 9, that we will begin to see some clarity and some direction will emerge. Chapter 9, it opens with a really sober and frank opening. It opens by reflecting on death. The teacher of Ecclesiastes begins considering the truth that death is the destination for everybody. Beginning in verse 1, so I reflected on all of this and concluded that the righteous and the wise and what they do are in God's hands. But no one knows whether love or hate awaits them. All share a common destiny. the righteous and the wicked, the good and the bad, the clean and the unclean, those who offer sacrifices and those who do not. The teacher in Ecclesiastes is recognizing that everybody has a common destiny. And what he's saying without saying it is that that common destiny is death. It doesn't matter if you're righteous, wise, or wealthy, or if you're evil, foolish, or poor, death awaits everybody. As some of the old-timers remind every athlete in the prime of their lives, Father Time is undefeated and no one makes it out of life alive. Death is our common destiny and our shared experience. Last week when Dr. Thomas preached, she referenced the role of a hospital chaplain, the minister who enters a hospital room unsure of what awaits each patient, but aware that eventually death is never outrun. Dr. Thomas said last week, I always leave hospital rooms shaky, knees wobbly, eyes twitching with each beep and blink of the machines, because I don't enter rooms to save the day or to take the pain away. My clergy robe is not a symbol of strength, and it doesn't double as a cape, but rather as sackcloth. Death is the great separator. Death isolates us from those that we love. It separates us from our passions and our pursuits. It cuts us off from our future and says to us, that's enough, often without asking us if we've had enough. It's why we grieve when a loved one passes, because our ability to continue the relationship and continue the love in that relationship is cut off. Even in long, fruitful lives, when death arrives, there can be a sense that even among the aged, there was more life and there was more love and there's more relationships and more living and more adventure and more stories that could have still been on the horizon. But now it's like memories that Facebook will remind me of every year at the same time, and it makes me laugh and cry all at once. Memories and grief, because we weren't meant to be separated from those that we love. That's why I think one of the reasons why in the book of Revelation, when God describes the end of it all, He describes it as a regathering of all that's been lost and separated. It's a gathering up together at a banquet, and there's not distance anymore. There's only union and reunion. I think that's why so many of the parables that Jesus taught are about reunions, of lost things found and broken things restored and relationships mended, and why so many of the miracles are about dead things coming back to life, dead limbs, dead eyes, dead skin, dead friends coming back to life, because death is the great separator. Death is not only the common destiny for all of us, it's also our common enemy. It's the one that aims to separate us and isolate us from the ones that we love and that love us. And that experience, the experience of death, though it was common, is also life-altering and life-shaping. 16 years ago, I've shared this story before, but 16 years ago, my friend Mike Stavlin, he lost his 4-month-old son, and in the aftermath of that loss, he wrote a memoir about the year following his son's death, and in that book, A Force of Will, his son's name was Will, he describes what mourning and grief looked like for him. He sought to put words to the pain of that separation. He describes it, he says what he'd like to do is he'd like to find a modest-sized house on a busy road. A house that looks like the kind of houses that you draw when you're like in kindergarten and you want to draw a house and it's a square with a triangle on top and it's got the windows and doors. He wants a house that looks like that. And then what he wants to do is he wants to take the house apart. But he doesn't want to do it by violence. No sledgehammers or explosives or wrecking balls or anything like that. He just wants to take a small framing hammer, a saw, maybe a crowbar, and then piece by gentle piece, he wants to dismantle the house. Every single shingle, tile, casing, fixture, pipe, cabinet, and wire, he writes. Every door, every wall, every floorboard, brick by brick, board by board, nail by nail. It would be a labor of love and devotion to take the house apart and methodically move it into neat piles in the front yard. And then after months of patient labor, he'd just leave the big empty space there for everyone to see, to remind everyone that there used to be something there. They'd drive by on their way to work and say to themselves, hey, there was something valuable there before, and now it's not. And people would feel that something is missing. Mike goes on with his imagination, saying, eventually over time, I'd stop by to take a truckload of the pieces away. I imagine myself arriving in the morning, putting pieces into the truck, and then hauling them off. Every day, truckload after truckload, until the lot was completely empty. And then I'd let the weeds and the trees and greenery reclaim the space for a while. I'd let it be wild. And then a couple of years later, I'd clean it up a little, mow the grass and clear out the brush and make it into a park so that people could enjoy it and it would be empty and full all at once. This is what death does. It separates us. I think Mike captures what grief and mourning in the aftermath of death are like. Grieving the things that are lost to us. It ties us to the things that we love and ache for and long for and desperately want for again or again for the first time. I think this is why Jesus came to defeat death on the cross. Jesus sought to dismantle the things that lead to isolation. The very thing that took place in Genesis, in the garden and in the fall, a death and isolation. And Jesus came to unravel all of that, to make a way for reunion and life. The writer in Ecclesiastes, I think they're trying to hold together this terror that's found in this tension, that all of us will die, that all of our days are numbered, and all of the days of all of those that we love. And he's trying to find a way to live in light of this truth. How do you face this fact and then it not sort of lead you down a road of fatalism or just throwing up your hands in exasperation and say, well, forget it all then. And with so much of Ecclesiastes' reflections on the meaningful life and the meaninglessness of life, there continues to always be this choice in front of us. Fatalism on the one hand or joyful freedom on the other. It's like fatalism versus carpe diem, the phrase from the Roman poet Horace, a phrase that means seize the day, a phrase that sort of echoes the poet Henry David Thoreau's longings when he writes, I wanted to live deeply and suck out all the marrow of life. But if all of our days are numbered, which way ought I go? The road that says each and every day is precious, and so live them all. Or we all have a common destiny and enemy. The author of Ecclesiastes recognizes the agonizing reality of life and death and encourages us to live deeply and freely, even in death's shadow. I want to say that again, that the author of Ecclesiastes recognizes the agonizing reality of life and death, and yet encourages us to live deeply and freely, even in death's shadow. Doesn't explain away death, nor does he try to assuage the shadow of death that our lives are lived in the shade of. Rather, Ecclesiastes holds all of it, holds it all together, and invites us to embrace this one good life that we are given. In the book of Psalms, there are a number of Psalms written by King David, and there's 3 that are written back to back to back, and that similarly sort of hold this tension of death and the life and the choice that we have to choose life and to make something of our lives. Psalm 22, it opens with this mournful, my God, why have you forsaken me? Why are you so far from saving me? So far from my cries of anguish. It's a mourning, it's a mournful lament. I could imagine this being sobbed in a hospital waiting room after receiving news that would reshape one's life. And in the very next chapter, perhaps the most famous of all the Psalms, the 23rd Psalm that opens, "The Lord is my shepherd, I lack nothing." Nothing. In the shadow of the 22nd Psalm that says, "Where are you?" And it's like a cadence. The response is, "God is my shepherd." It's a psalm of celebration. It's a psalm of banquet tables and blessings, even in the face of death. I could imagine it also being a response in celebration in a hospital room after receiving news that would renew one's life. And then there's Psalm 24, a psalm that anchors one's death in one's life, a psalm that invites us to choose life because it is life, after all, that we find best and most deepest in God, in God's self. Psalm 24, "The earth is the Lord's and everything in it, the world and all who live in it." It's a reminder that God is still in control even over death, that our lives and our stories are bound up in God's life and God's story. And death doesn't have the last nor final word. And this is Ecclesiastes' invitation to us, even amidst the shadow of death. In verse 7, the teacher writes, "Go and eat your food with gladness. Drink your wine with a joyful heart, for God has already approved of what you do. Always be clothed in white, and always anoint your head with oil. Enjoy life with your wife, whom you love, all the days of this meaningless life that God has given you under the sun, all your meaningless days. For this is your lot in life, and in your toilsome labor under the sun." What the teacher of Ecclesiastes is encouraging us to do is to cultivate joy and to live life, to enjoy the days that we have while we have them. In pastor and author Eugene Peterson's translation of the Bible called The Message, he paraphrases this passage this way. He says, "Seize life. Eat bread with gusto," unless you're gluten-free, and then translate yourself. "Drink wine with a robust heart. God takes pleasure in your pleasure. Dress festively every morning. Don't skimp on colors or scarves. Relish life with the one that you love each and every day of your precious life. Each day is God's gift, and make the most of each one. Whatever turns up, grab it and do it. Go to the party." It doesn't say that, I just added that. "This is your last and only chance at it." We're now 9 chapters into Ecclesiastes, a book that's filled with paradox, with wisdom, with insight and truth-telling. And as we begin to head down the home stretch of the book, there's a bit of fog, I think, that's beginning to lift. And it's this: choose life and live as fully as possible. And this invitation isn't an invitation towards, like some sanctified version of like hedonism, wherein one only thinks about one's self by themselves, but lives life, embraces life with a recognition that, as the psalmist notes, that the earth is the Lord's. And as Ecclesiastes reprises, God has approved of your gladness of life. Jesus would actually put a finer point on this invitation to live deeply by helping us make one more turn towards Him. Jesus would counsel that the best way to live life to the fullest and deepest is to embrace Him, the author and sustainer of all of life. Jesus would say, speaking about life and living, He would say these things like, "I am the way, the truth, and the life. I am the bread of life. I have come to give life abundantly. I am the resurrection and the life. Whoever follows me will have the light of life. I am the true God and eternal life. In me is life, and my life is the light of humanity. I give life to the world. God has given us eternal life, and this life is His Son. To live is Christ. Ecclesiastes puts before us the brutal truth that death is ahead for all of us. And yet Ecclesiastes invites us to live lives of joy and of hope and meaning and purpose and gladness right now. Remembering that God holds the whole world in his hands. He's got you and me, siblings, in his hands. He's got the whole world in his hands. And that God has approved of your life. Harry Baker is a British poet living on the English seaside town of Margate. During Advent of last year, Harry wrote a poem for Christ City during our Advent series. I'm sure if you look around on our YouTube channel, Google something, Harry Baker, you might find it. I'm sure it's posted there. So we got a pretty awesome YouTube channel. Earlier this week on the BBC podcast Daily Service, Harry shared a poem that he wrote where he'd been reflecting on his death and on his funeral and how he wanted to be remembered and how that ought to shape his life now. Harry writes, "Ideally, I would like 100 benches, every single one of them facing the sea. If that's too much fuss, I'd settle for the one somewhere in Margate where you can sit and come and think and be. And I don't need a fancy pot to keep my ashes. Just find a decent spot where there's a breeze. So the next time someone gasps at all the wonder in the world, a part of them is breathing in a part of me. And at my funeral, I'd like there to be sunflowers, a truly inconvenient amount. I too have spent a lifetime searching for the light, and I don't see a reason why that should stop now. Don't let anyone apologize for crying. It was honestly my favorite thing to do. Just make sure everybody knows how much I loved being alive, and the only thing I loved more was loving you. If anyone says I have gone to a better place, that is a kind and very well-intentioned lie, for there can be no better place than in a room with all my friends. Just promise we'll do this again on the other side. Side note, let's also do this loads before we die. And by that point, it may well be that I would hate it. I'll live for ages, and my taste will change with time. But one thing that I know I will always find amazing is what a thing it is to live a life. The invitation for us is to choose life in this moment, in this day, knowing that God is the holder of all of our lives. And in that, we can truly live. Let me pray for us.